The speaker is, oh wait, what's your name? Ed Lee. I should be able to remember a simple name. Ed Lee, and he's going to talk about decentralized intellectual property, decentralized IP, DIP.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Ed Lee. I'm a law professor at Chicago-Kent College of Law. I'm also the founder of a website, NFT.com, N-O-U-NFT.com. Hope you check it out after my talk. Today I'm presenting a synopsis of a paper that I'm working on. It's the most controversial paper that I've written in my 20+ years as an academic. The title is NFTs as Decentralized Intellectual Property. Now you probably are familiar with the term DeFi, or decentralized finance. Cryptocurrencies are playing a major part of it, and the basic idea there is there's an alternative financial system no longer under the control of centralized banks and financial institutions, especially the Federal Reserve. In my paper, I argue there's a parallel movement transformation occurring in our copyright system. It is a decentralization of our copyright system largely being effectuated by NFTs. Now, how do I actually get to that position? Okay, here's a little bit of practical information before we get into the really geeky theory that underlies DIP. As you've heard in previous panels, there typically should be an IP license that accompanies the NFT or smart contract, and that IP license will set forth the rights that the buyer receives, especially importantly, the commercialization rights, if any, that the buyers receive. Now, I've summarized 4 sort of blue chip NFT collections that are very successful that have different takes on how much commercialization rights the buyer gets. Let's start first with the Doodles project. They had an amazing week this week, made a major announcement with Pharrell Williams coming on as their chief brand officer. Their license limits commercial rights to $100,000 per year. They also ban certain forms of content like pornography, so you can't use doodles with pornography, thank goodness. If you want to go above the $100,000, you have to ask for permission to approach the project to get further rights. Okay, second project, Bored Ape Yacht Clubs, which you've heard talked about in previous panels. They were one of the innovators in this space very early. They've adopted an unlimited commercialization right license to buyers. So that means there's no cap on $100,000. If you buy a Bored Ape, you keep all the revenues except for what you have to pay for taxes to the United States government. So why does this matter? Because some of the Bored Ape owners are very famous people, like Snoop Dogg, who has come out with, he calls his Bored Ape Dr. Bombay. He's come out with an ice cream brand based on his Bored Ape character. So he easily could make over $100,000 a year. I bet he will, this year. And he's also used his Bored Ape in music videos and also in avatars for the sandbox. Okay, so if that doesn't blow your mind, the next 2 examples should. The World of Women project have gone one step further and have completely transferred their IP rights over to the buyers of their NFTs, except for the trademark, which stays with the World of Women. That means the buyers of the NFTs are the exclusive rights owners, not the World of Women project. Okay, now that I think is a really generous grant to the buyers of the NFTs. The last example I want to use is the Nouns DAO project. This is the most radical approach. It is still one that confounds me thinking about it. It's really an amazing business model. They donate their IP to the public domain under a Creative Commons 0 license, CC0, and some of the most vocal advocates for Web3 are arguing for greater adoption of CC0 licenses. So anybody can use the Nouns characters, commercialize them for free, because there's no longer copyright protection for it. Yet, the Nouns sells NFTs, one per day, typically for over $100,000. So that shows you the independent value of the NFT. Now, what I've just described to you could be told as a story that fits within our traditional IP system, our copyright system, and say, oh, of course, the copyright owner always gets the right to grant whatever licenses he or she wants. These are more progressive than what we've seen before, but sure, it fits within our copyright system. I think that would be a mistake if that were the conclusion. It would be missing the forest for the trees, because we really need to step back and look at the broad picture of how the NFTs operate with the IP licenses. And when we put those two components together, we are seeing an alternative to our copyright system being effectuated by people, not Congress. Congress is not needed at all. That's the decentralized aspect of DIP, just as with DeFi and cryptocurrencies. Now, how will I prove to you in the next 4 minutes that my theory is valid and this is what is going on? Well, I probably won't do that in 4 minutes, but I will present to you, I have a little bit more time, thankfully. I will present to you the major points of evidence that I think supports my theory, as well as send you to a link that has my article, a draft of my article, where you can read it if you totally want to geek out on this topic. First point in support of my theory, NFTs are intellectual property. Intellectual property is defined as a creation of the mind protected by exclusive rights. Typically, we expect legislatures to create those exclusive rights or the common law. What's happening with NFTs are that the exclusive rights are created by technology, blockchain. But the intellectual creation of the mind that sits on blockchain or is associated with blockchain is what we would consider to be a digital twin of whatever the underlying content is. A cartoon character, the digital twin of it that exists on blockchain. So the NFTs are IP. They're not just smart contracts. Evidence number 2. And this is probably the strongest piece of evidence in support of my theory. Resale royalties, artists love it. This is a common feature of NFTs. You just bake it right into the smart contract. You will automatically get, as the creator, a resale royalty for every resale of your NFTs. Let's say 10% is a typical amount, and it'll come automatically to your wallet. This is a right that Congress has rejected 6 times since 1976. Even though the Copyright Office has endorsed the adoption of a formal resale royalty right within our copyright system, France adopted this a long time ago at the turn of the 20th century. It's called droit de suite, and about 80 countries around the world recognize it, not the United States. Well, you know what? That doesn't matter anymore because creators have recognized it themselves through blockchain. Evidence number 3. Everybody knows copy pasta, right? Copy pasta, you go on OpenSea or other marketplaces, you see unauthorized derivatives, clones, remixes, expansion versions of the most successful NFT collections. By and large, those collections are not asserting DMCA notices or copyright takedowns for those copy pasta NFT unauthorized uses of the underlying artwork, many of which would be considered to be copyright infringement in a traditional understanding of unauthorized derivative works. But in the Web3 ethos, it is widely permitted of CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, Moonbirds, you name it, doodles as well. And then the 4th piece of evidence is the very generous grant of commercial rights to buyers under a Web3 approach. That is something that we have not seen before. Disney would never do this. Disney follows the all rights reserved approach, retaining commercialization rights. Just think when you buy some Mickey Mouse paraphernalia. Disney is not giving you the right to monetize Mickey Mouse from that, but that is what a lot of these Web3 NFT projects are doing. Okay, so my thesis is that what we're seeing with this DIP system is that our traditional copyright system is less important. It's not completely obliterated, but it's becoming less important for Web3. And if you want to find out all of the arguments or analysis that I provide for this theory, you can Google DIP SSRN, and hopefully Google does its magic, and it will be the top-ranked listing if you do this Google search. And with the remaining 10 seconds I have, I want to share with you my big reveal. It's not Pharrell Williams, but this theory will be laid out in an article, a law review article, that I don't expect you will read. It'll come out in 2023 in the University of Illinois Law Review, but Harper Business will be publishing my book next year in the beginning of 2003, Creators Take Control, that will lay out this theory about decentralized intellectual property, so you have that to look forward to.
That's amazing. I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So, I mean, if we rewind a little bit, you're basing this right on essentially the creator's ability to sort of set the rules for their work of art, right? I mean, you're not really going astray of US law by doing that.
Correct. It's, I guess I would characterize it as a form of private ordering through mass licensing and also the NFT. There will be, and this is sort of getting into the weeds, so to speak, there will be some difficult questions whether doing this DIP system should be preempted by our Copyright Act. So, for instance, we do have a limited term of copyright, the life of the author plus 70 years. You're not supposed to have a copyright that lasts longer, forever. But under the NFT, in theory, it could last forever, right? And you could get resale royalties forever. And I think, to me, that will be worked out later on by courts if that should be preempted. Like, you can't go past the copyright term for, let's say, resale royalties.
I mean, I think this is just an interesting point because it's sort of an indication of how blockchain technologies really do allow for self-governance.
Yes.
And really can, I mean, if you look at sort of the cracks in our governmental system and the age of our empire, you sort of, historically, they don't last forever. And so the question is, what comes next? And there's a lot of dystopian things that could come next that we see around the world. But I think blockchain, through ideas like this, allow for a level of self-governance that would allow us to actually reduce the size of governance and the number of things that the government affects just through self-selection.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beauty of blockchain, that it is a governance system. So if you come up with some idea, you could effectuate it and then scale it, right? So if artists want resale royalties, it's just baked in to the smart contract. And then, the way that contracting often works is people look and see, well, what did somebody else do? And somebody else adopted resale royalties. So it's like, that's great. And then marketplaces like OpenSea actually have a function where you can choose any resale royalties that you want. So that becomes really a widespread practice within basically 2 years, right? That's like the mind-blowing aspect of it. Congress considers resale royalties for over 50 years, rejects it. Within 2 years, you just do it through blockchain. It's quite incredible.
Right, and you're doing it with your IP. If you're the creator, you're saying, for my IP, resale royalty, I don't care what Congress says, for my IP, resale royalties can be sold.
Exactly.
And why is this system better than Creative Commons?
Well, I don't know if we need to consider them to be different or not mutually exclusive, because CC0 is one option for the content license. So if that's the trend where it goes, that would be, I think, consistent with a fully, completely decentralized IP system that doesn't depend on even copyright. So I think CC0 or Creative Commons licenses are perfectly compatible with decentralized intellectual property. I would actually argue that Creative Commons and open source licenses for computer programs They were prior examples of decentralized intellectual property. The benefit of blockchain and an NFT is that the NFT has independent value. So you no longer have to worry about all the digital copies that exist, and they're unauthorized copies, because now you have, like the Nouns project realizes, you have independent value in that just unique token.
And the last question I have, and there's a question from the audience as well. The last question I have is the NFT can be changed, I mean, at a later date, correct? I mean, you have the licensing and the rules that you've applied around your own piece of intellectual property through this NFT, but it can be revised.
Yeah, that's a sticky question. I think it kind of depends on what the original contract says. If it had a clause that said this could be modified at our will. Otherwise, if it doesn't have it, you might run into a problem where you can't unilaterally change a contract that was already formed because there's a lack of consideration. The other party got nothing out of it, so you can't just change the terms. But oftentimes you'll see they actually include a clause that says we can change the terms of our contract at will, and but you can agree to that ahead of time.
Right. I mean, I think this stuff is fascinating because I wrote an article recently saying that basically DAOs are the punk rock of corporate law, and similarly, this is sort of a punk rock approach to the law. If you think about it, is we can do it our own way. So you could actually put into the NFT the ability for the creator to change the rules later, which obviously could be problematic if they hurt people who already made transactions, or for a DAO to change the rules at a later date.
Yeah,
so
and to go back to your example, I mean, that's what Larry Lessig wanted to do with Creative Commons. That's exactly right. Realizing the restrictiveness of the default approach of copyright, how do we change it? And I think this is a part of that evolution, basically, of figuring it out and using technology to do so.
Right. So you know, this area and in other areas in the blockchain should really think of this as an opportunity to evolve the law to become more efficient and also to serve us. You know, the law is meant to serve us, not just be there. So this is our opportunity to do that. We had a question from the audience. Yeah, so the question is, if you give your rights to the public domain, how do you make money?
I mean, that's the $64,000 question for the Nouns project. There are other projects that are attempting to do this. There was another project, sort of maybe a little bit less successful, the MFers, that are trying to create value through the NFT and build up a brand. Punk 4156 is a co-founder of the Nouns DAO, and he's an ardent supporter of Creative Commons licenses. And his theory, this is a theory that's being played out now, so you know we have to see how it materializes. His theory is that spreading the work through the public domain helps to create a brand. So it's like wide-scale adoption, and sometimes it could become a meme. Meanwhile, others in the Nouns community are doing derivative works. I don't know if you've seen the glasses for the Nouns around NFT.NYC. That's a derivative work, and there's somebody creating a physical set of glasses for it. And there are other projects involving books and toys, and they're trying to develop movies and films, TV shows with it. So that's how you can potentially abandon your copyright and yet still build up a brand around the original content.